What's up guys? So right now we're just outside of Byron Bay at Killen Waterfall, and a little bit of a change up on our previous videos, but we thought we'd just show you how we take pictures of a waterfall and we'll take you through the editing process and everything like that. Okay, so first things first, we got to figure out our composition for the photo. So we'll walk around, try and find a good spot. Okay, so we set it on here as our first spot, as there was a little plant that we could use in the foreground, which we thought might spice up the photo with a touch of green. But before we go any further, I'll just talk about the gear we're using. So if you're doing long exposure, most likely you want a tripod. The lens we're using is a Tacina 11 to 16mm, which is quite wide, but it only equates to a 17 to 25 on a full frame. And then because you're doing long exposure during daylight, you'd want an ND filter. As for the camera, we have a Rebel SL2, also known as 200D in some places. And if you're doing an exposure for more than 30 seconds, you'll need an intervalometer as well. Once you're happy with the composition of the photo, the next step is to set the manual focus. To do this, we usually just zoom into the specific section of the photo that we want in focus, and then once you're zoomed in, it's quite easy to adjust accordingly and make sure that area is in focus, as well as make sure there's no chromatic aberrations. At this point, we're about to take our first photo, but the camera died on us. Thankfully, we had a backup battery with us, which is always good. I always recommend having a spare battery, just in case you're doing a really long shoot, or you're like us and you just forget to charge it from your previous shoot. Also, it might seem super obvious, but preferably there's no one in the foreground of your shot, but if there is, it doesn't matter because Photoshop make it quite easy to remove people with their content-aware fill function. Another factor to consider is the lighting. Ideally, you'd want an overcast day in order to prevent shadows and overexposed sections to your photo. The day we went out was quite a sunny day, so we had to wait for our moments to take advantage of when the sun was behind the clouds. Finally, on to the settings. It really depends on a number of factors, as well as a bit of trial and error. But for this, I like to put it in bulb mode, which allows your exposure to be as long as you want. And in doing this, it allows your aperture to be as high as possible. And with a higher aperture, more of the photo is able to be in focus. So here we have an aperture of 18. As well as being able to have a high aperture, you can also keep your ISO as low as possible. The lowest ISO we can do on our camera is 100. On some cameras you're able to go way lower, 32, possibly even lower in more expensive cameras. As well as this, I recommend taking raw photos, which means it's unprocessed data, which gives you a lot more versatility later when you want to edit the photo in Lightroom. I'll just run through the Lightroom edit for this photo. We use the Lightroom app as it's only $6 or $7 a month, which is about half price of the computer version. It also allows us to edit on the road and makes it easier for us. So the first thing we did was add a crop. Because the YouTube crop will be 16:9, we chose a 16:9 crop just so we can use it for this video. Starting with the light settings, we increase the contrast in order to increase the difference between the light and dark areas. Then decrease the highlights so there aren't any overexposed sections, and then increase the shadows so you can see some of the spots that were behind the cave and that, and then increase the exposure of the whole photo just a touch. Then moving on to the color. Because we shot in RAW, we had a lot of control over the depth of colors, so we toned down the temperature a bit, gave it a nice blue tint, a wintry feel if you will. Increase the vibrance and the saturation a touch. Then moving on to the HSL tabs, we focused primarily on green, increased the hue a bit so it was a darker, richer green. We left the saturation as it was because we increased saturation of the photo, and just decreased the luminance a touch to again give it a darker. Then we got a little carried away playing with the orange colours, giving it a red tinge. Which I thought looked pretty cool, but it's pretty unrealistic for an Australian spring photo, but oh well. And then moving on, we gave it a bit of clarity as well. Whenever there's rocks in the photo, usually tends to look pretty good when you increase the clarity. And then we put some negative vignetting, and which kind of added a dark tinge around the outside, which I thought just draws people into the center of the photo. And then finally we also increased the noise reduction just to soften the pixels a little bit with the previous edits. And then that is the photo. So it's a good idea to take as many photos as you can, because when you get home you don't know what's going to work and what isn't, so you'll thank yourself in the future if you just take more than what you think you'll use. So we had our work cut out for us with this photo because it was a bit underexposed, but we used a similar process as we did with the last photo, but we added a bit of spice to it. I know what you're thinking, you can't just add a rainbow to a photo, but I thought we'd try something different. And I mean, if we were to edit it again, it would probably turn out completely different, but that's the thing, you can do whatever you want to your photos and it'll be different every time. And continuing the trend of abstract photos, we took a few from this angle as well. This spot was a bit of a scramble to get to, but totally worth it. And may have got a little bit carried away with this edit. Thought I'd add a little smoky effect, which I thought could pass as fog. Not sure if it passes as realistic, but you know, it doesn't always have to. The last shot we did with this lens was straight on at the waterfall. I really like this shot, however I was a little bit annoyed that the sky was so blown out. So in the edit I actually cropped in a new sky, which to some might be considering breaking a few rules, but I figured why not just give it a crack, test out the old Photoshop skills, and I thought it could pass as realistic as well. Thank you for watching the video. I plan on doing a couple more photography related videos, so stay tuned for those, and we'll continue our vlogs as well.